Podcasting from the beautiful state of Maine, welcome to another episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast, the show that focuses on identifying and developing the skills and behaviors that will inspire, empower, and compel others to follow your lead. Listen as Patrick's guests talk about the powerful leadership approaches they have identified and developed, which are vital for leading in today's challenging times. These are the same approaches that will positively impact you as a leader too. Learning from Leaders provides the right balance of leadership research with real-world scenarios, making it easy for you to rise above your best. All right, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Veroneau, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Learning from Leaders. And this episode for me is really special. This is a woman that I met in a workshop we were doing together. We were in a breakout group together, and her name is Kristal Murren, and she runs a company called Bossy Girl Leadership. And at first, when I heard that, I didn't really know how to take it. And after hearing her story and really what her mission is regarding Bossy Girl Leadership, it made perfect sense to me. And I knew I wanted to get her on an episode and be able to talk about it. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I hope you're able to listen to the whole thing and reach out to her as well. Let's get into it. Kristal, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. I have been looking forward to this Bossy Girl Leadership, and I think we're really going to get an idea on what it means in terms of redefining Bossy Girl. So thank you for being on this podcast, and I'd love for you to be able to share really how did this whole thing come about for you?
Oh my goodness. Well, Patrick, I could not be more honored to be here. I love everything that you're about and what you stand for. So I just am grateful that you offered me this invitation. And to start, what I'd have to say before I tell you my story, as we were prepping for this, you said to me, my wife is a bossy girl and my daughter's a bossy girl too, but we're trying to work with her on what that looks like. And so the story that I wanted to share with everyone as we get started is if you have a woman in your life that's on a mission, has a purpose, and has a voice, she's probably been called bossy. And what I'm all about is taking that and using it as our motivation to grow and do better. And let me tell you why that is. So my story is one of really great triumph, but also a lot of failure. Whenever I was 37 years old, I was on my way to work one day. I was a single mom of a 9-year-old little girl, and I was stopped at a red light, waiting to go to work, and I was hit from behind by a truck at 55 miles per hour. When I got out of that car, I didn't realize at the time that my life would never, ever be the same again. When I got out of that car, even though I could stand up on my own and there was only just a little bit of blood from the glass that had broken through and cut me through my hair, I could walk at that point, but I didn't realize at the time I no longer had any of my memory. I didn't remember where I'd been or who I was to any large degree, and I couldn't read and write. And I spent a year in darkness looking for answers, trying to do what doctors told me, which was don't think and don't use your brain. When I started to fight back against that prescription, doctors started telling me I was bossy and even wrote that word in my charts. And I went to the parking lot oftentimes crying, but knew that there was more to this than what I could ever have imagined. I realized at that time that I was given a gift, I was given a voice, and I was given talent, that I had to come back from what I was facing right now so that I could make sure that my daughters weren't called bossy like I was. Or if they were called bossy, their only answer to that would be thank you. And I want that for my daughters, and I want it for yours. So that's why I'm here, and that's what I'm about.
Yeah. So we had the conversation before we got on this of, as a male, right? If I'm assertive or I'm pushing on something, it's often like, go get them, right?
Yes.
Not the same thing. I think we both know the word, right? If it's a female.
Bitch.
Yeah.
She's a bitch. Yes. Yes.
And I think that really is almost like is it gaslighting, right? What we call it that, where you sort of like, it forces somebody to take a step back and say, well, I don't want to be seen as that. So I guess I don't say anything.
Absolutely. And honestly, to a large degree, I believe that the way this plays out in our society is subconscious. We have seen this is the way. If somebody says something you don't like, or even just pushes you outside your comfort zone, you can use a B word like bossy or the other one, and you can subconsciously shut them down and stay in your own comfort zone so nobody with strength can push you to be somewhere you don't want to be. Biologically, our brains are inclined to keep us safe, and they don't want us to have any discomfort. And unfortunately, we have to have discomfort in order to grow. There has to be friction. But when somebody applies friction and they're a woman, oftentimes we have a very easy out by just using a quick B word, and it shuts her down and it allows us to stay in our comfort zone. And again, I don't see it as something that's happening in our society as a malicious thing, but I do believe it's something that does happen.
Yeah. So you go through that process yourself, right? Where now you're seeing like, wow, even in my charts, I'm being called bossy. What was the point where you said, I'm going to turn this into a business. I'm going to create a company where I go out and help females that can build this level of confidence in themselves to not shy away from that?
Well, I have to tell you, Patrick, what I've known for a long time is that I believe, and what I did with my recovery is I ended up enrolling in one of the most challenging master's degree programs I could find. And I started researching women's behavior. And I used my motivation to understand women in leadership to power my recovery in learning to read and write again. So what I learned is that women are by far our most untapped resource. Women systematically underestimate themselves every single time. When given an opportunity to evaluate themselves, men will always over-evaluate themselves. And obviously, I'm speaking in absolutes. There are always exceptions to the rule. Absolutely. And women typically will underestimate themselves. And this is how this goes. So what I realized is that if I wanted to make a difference in the world, I had to support women in owning their own brilliance and owning their own purpose and being willing to use their voice. One of my greatest gifts was courage. I have been given the gift of courage. Maybe not so graceful. Maybe there's a lot of gifts that I was not given, but courage is one of them that I was. And what I learned is that I could use my courage to go first and shine a bright light and allow people. I love, one of my favorite things to do is go to a large conference and I'll introduce myself. I'll stand up and I'll say, hi, I'm Kristal and I'm the bossy girl. And do you know, everybody will laugh, hysterical. It's so funny, right?
Yeah.
But then when we start talking about the story and we start talking about why I'm the bossy girl, everything changes. Nobody's laughing anymore because they understand how it feels when somebody does that to them, or they know they've done that to somebody else and they suddenly have a recognition that they were unconsciously hurting someone. So what I've done is use that brash nature and my courage and boldness to go first, shine my light, use my voice, allow people to laugh, allow it, and show that it's okay to allow them to laugh and to say, but you know what? I know who I am. And I'm going to let you laugh, because if you laugh at me, and then you're willing to hear my story, I'm hopeful that next time you won't laugh at somebody else.
Yeah. So it's funny because your story that you say you get up and tell people, right, I'm the bossy girl, and they laugh, and then they hear the backstory. I was in that same boat. When you first were introduced in one of the calls we were on, I chuckled in the beginning, and all of a sudden your story, I was like, oh my, like that. It puts a whole different perspective on what you're talking about and what that means. And that was why I was just like, I absolutely think it's a great fit to have you on this in regards to talking about leadership. To your other point is, in much of the work that I've done with executives, especially in healthcare and females, it is one thing that I have noticed, that they discount their significance in the group that I would not see in a male, and they are far more competent than most of the males that I deal with. Yet there's almost this self-deprecation that happens.
Yes.
which is interesting. And again, you speak to it.
Absolutely. So what happens for women? And so often we know that we need to be strong or almost behave as if we are men or behave the way we've seen men behave in order to be successful. Because when we look up the chain of command, when we look toward power, we see men. That's who's sitting in those seats. And we often believe that we have to behave that way if we're going to be successful. Then when we behave that way, we're not accepted. And we start to realize, okay, wait, I do have strengths as a woman. Maybe I need to be softer, more nurturing, listen. But then we're not considered competent. We're not respected. People don't believe that we actually know what we're doing. And we get caught up in this double standard and we don't know what is expected of us. And the truth is, one of the things we need to know as leaders, if you want to be successful, you have to know how to set expectations. People need to know what is expected of them if they're following you, because if they know what's expected of them, they can either rise above it or they know when they're falling below, and that allows them to course correct. Well, as women in society, we don't have expectations. We don't know what is expected of us. Which side of the coin do you want us to live on? Do you want us to use our natural strengths? Do you want us to behave the way we've seen others behave? What is it that you want from us? And what happens is when we don't understand the expectations, we get quiet, we get small. And if we don't know that we're exceeding the expectation, then we can't say to you, I can't say, Patrick, let me tell you, I am among the top 3% of leaders. And let me tell you why. Because we don't actually know what makes an amazing female leader. We don't know. We don't see it and we don't talk about it. So that's why I'm out there talking about this is what it looks like. And guess what? When we are assertive, and understand when I say assertive, I'm not talking about aggressive. I do not give license to women being a bitch or hurting other people to get what she wants. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is being willing to be assertive and use your voice, because I guarantee if you look at the women in your organization, they have far more strengths than what they've shown you. And if you're not having real conversations, real leadership conversations about what she's capable of, you have an untapped resource, because she will always play small unless you allow her to use her voice. Or if she's someone that has done the inner work to accept that there are expectations that she just will never be able to live up to, and she's okay with that.
I go back to what you said earlier about courage. And when I think of courage, right, you spoke about it too, that part of our brain, the amygdala, right? We're always trying to protect ourselves.
Yes.
That's what we do. And if I'm thinking I'm going to speak up in front of this group, my brain is saying, don't do it, right? This is not going to end well for you.
Yes.
And it tries to keep us. And I think certainly men experience that too. But what we're talking about right now in terms of this example, I can see that where you're like, no, this isn't good. And it's really trying to talk that amygdala out of the conversation of saying, I've got to do this. And
You're so right. And it's funny. I often talk to women about fear, vulnerability, shame, things of that nature. And one of the things that we talk about is how, as you're saying, with our amygdala and with our flight or fight responses, we avoid pain, and we see pain as the enemy. We see fear as the enemy. And what is difficult is there is no possibility for courage without fear being present. When we're afraid, that means there's something that could possibly be worth exploring here. And only by making the choice of courage will we find out what that is. So many of us live a life of mediocre. We live a life of just okay. And the truth is, if we were willing to explore the fear, if we were willing to make the choice of courage, excellence could be available. And that's what I do, is help people discover excellent.
Yeah. So along those lines, how does that happen? When somebody shows up, who tends to come to you and say, look, I need to figure some things out here?
Absolutely. So we have a couple different options and ways what things that can look like. So first of all, I have been doing leadership development, servant leadership, character development for almost 20 years now. Most of my work has been in the government. And what I did was I developed the Leadership Development Institute that was used in Pennsylvania state government and is still the hallmark of leadership development in our state. What that looked like was a year-long leadership development program that really changed the way that people looked at life, not just work, not just supervising, but really, what did it mean to be a partner? What did it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to lead a team? What does it mean to be a wife or a husband? What does that look like? And how do we do that well? So that's what that looked like for me for many, many years. And what happened was after my accident and after creating Bossy Girl Leadership, I still continued doing long-term leadership development work with the government and with other large agencies. So I work within large agencies and build their teams to be the best they can be. That's still what I do. But what I realized as well is there were a lot of women, and I actually have men that work with me one-on-one also, who have come to me and said, Kristal, I just don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. So I've built a community that is for women who don't have necessarily a government agency or a hospital that they're working with, that can come to www.bossygirl.org and they can join my community. And it's $23 a month. It's nothing. And we work one-on-one building their confidence. And men, we do the same thing, but that's more in an individual coaching relationship.
Interesting. A lot of what you talk about, I go back to the concept of clear expectations. And I put that in there with courage from a standpoint of looking at being promoted within an organization, that if I don't have the courage to ask, how do I get to the next step? What am I being evaluated on? I think those two things become really important. From my experience with organizations, that's where I often see the breakdown, is that we don't have really clear expectations of what's necessary to get me to the next step.
Yes, absolutely. Another thing, I have people that work with me who do very incredible work around performance management. And if you haven't set expectations in your workplace, you must do that. But the one thing I want to add to that, as we're having this conversation around courage and bossy and all of these things that we as leaders, and I'm going to say not just women, but as leaders, if you don't believe that you're promotable, if you don't believe that you deserve it, it doesn't even have to be spoken out loud. People know that. They feel it in their bones. They are not going to promote you and seek you out and push you forward if you don't think that you're worthy of that. And if you're at a place where you don't think you're worthy of that, that's where we have to start. We have to start looking at your own ability to think that you can meet these expectations. Because the truth is, you wouldn't be where you are if you were not worthy. You can do this. It's just understanding that and projecting that to the people that you touch. They need to feel that you know that you're worthy. And then they will probably understand that as well.
Yeah, it's such a great point. It is really such an inner talk that we need to have with ourselves in terms of...
It's the energy that you're sharing. And people know right away, is that something they want to be a part of? Or is it something they don't want to be a part of? And it's so interesting when you watch leaders who try to lead with power and control, and it's very negative, and people know right away, okay, I'll do what you want me to do right now, but as soon as I can get away from you, I'm out. And then the organizations wonder, why do they have such turnover? Well, people know. People
don't recognize, I think oftentimes, or underappreciate mindset, how important that is. Years ago, I used to help people interviewing with a group. I used to volunteer at a group called the Unemployed Professionals. And that group used to have people, a number of which were over 50 years old. And there was this stigma that once you're over 50, basically it's over, baby. You don't get a job. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to hire you. And I would tell people that if you go in with that mindset of I'm already behind, you are done. You're done, because it bleeds out of you when you show up in terms of how you show up. You don't walk the same, you don't talk the same, because in the back of your mind, you're saying, I don't deserve to be here. I don't have a shot at this job.
It's so funny that you used the words you did, because the first thing that came to my mind was, it's like you're in the ocean and you're bleeding and the sharks smell it. They smell it and they come for you. The mindset is the same thing. People smell it.
Yeah. And I think you're willing to accept less when that happens, right? Because if I'm thinking, well, I'm over 50, I'm out of the market. If it doesn't go your way, you're just sort of like, oh, I knew it wasn't possible, right? And I think the same thing with courage in this regard, right? You just sort of, if you don't think you're worthy enough for it, you're willing to not fight for it.
Oh my word. And think about how you're going to perform when you walk into an interview. And on this hand, in your mind, you're saying, they're not going to hire me. I'm too old. I'm over the hill. This is over for me. Why would they even want me? I won't be here long. Think about how you're going to perform with that. Or on the other hand, you go into an interview and you think, aren't they lucky to have my wealth of experience and wisdom and all of these things that I can bring into their organization that they can't get from somebody with less experience? How amazing of a difference can I make in their organization? This is going to be an incredible partnership. And think about how you are going to project yourself with that one mindset versus the other. It's incredible.
As we're sort of wrapping things up, a question comes to mind in terms of, we've been in this pandemic, and we certainly hear so much right now about the great resignation and all the people that are leaving their jobs. I'm just curious, from your perspective, has this environment shifted people in regards to being more open to looking at, well, I need to do something different. I'm willing to sort of take a risk here, go out on a limb, but things have got to change?
I think the answer is an absolute yes. It has definitely changed the way that people look at things. And I will say for myself, as I look at the Great Resignation, and when I think about, unfortunately, most of those resignations are women. We have made so many steps backward because the household needs somebody at home right now. And again, I'm just going to share a very quick story from my own life. I'm a single mom. And what happened over the last 2 years is every time I would set an appointment, something would happen at daycare and they would shut down with no notice. I have no one else to support me in that initiative. And consistently, every step forward I would make 2 steps backward because I didn't have the support that was normal that other people would have. And I didn't have regularly, my children were not going to school. Daycare was closed. And it was constantly, I had no idea what to expect and I couldn't plan for it. So if I was in a different situation, I would have lost my job or had to resign. There would have been no other option. I'm lucky that I've built a community that allowed me to continue through this, but there are many people who have not had that. And what happens, and what I see happening, is a rising of people in this time finding their purpose, understanding that courage is possible, and starting to live in the direction of what they were put on this earth to do. I think that's where we're going. And with all of the fear and the war and the sickness and the loss and the loneliness, there's only 2 things that will help us through this. 1 is leadership and 2 is purpose. And I believe in our resilience. And I know because I've been in the dark. I've walked a path of pain. And I truly believe God gave me that path so that I could share it with other people and inspire them to keep going in the darkness. This is darkness. And we have the opportunity to keep going if we choose that. Resilience is there for us. Courage is there for us. Purpose is there for us. Go after it.
I totally agree with you. And I think looking at the environment that we're in, it really does provide for those that are willing to look at it that way. There are huge opportunities here, either for personal growth, but also I think the organizations that understand the shift that has happened will attract, to me, the best talent, and they will retain it because they're continually being curious as to what the needs are of the individuals that work for their organization. we're in a different world right now. And I think one that will be much better if we choose it to be that way. So,
everything about what we believe in, Patrick, and everything about what we do it's all a choice. And so often there's the debate of leadership. Is it a skill or is it an art? And which one, when we define it and you look it up on Google, which one is it? And oftentimes it does say it's a skill. I will go against Webster and Google and all of that. And I will say that all day, leadership is a choice. And we have an opportunity to choose. I mean, when you look at leadership skills, things such as honesty and trust, you don't have to learn how to be honest. You choose being honest. And that's how we become leaders. So I think it's a choice we all have available to us.
I'm right there with you. So if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is www.bossygirl.org. Get on there, join the community, reach out. There's a million ways to contact me, and the book will be out in the very near future. So
awesome. We'll be looking
forward to
that.
We're having a good time.
Kristal, thank you so much for this. Always a pleasure. I knew this was going to be an awesome conversation. I love your energy and what you stand for. So wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Peace.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Learning from Leaders podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Until next time, keep rising above your best as a leader.